All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling a figure who, well, he never fails to fascinate Diogenes of Sinope.
Yeah, he's definitely a character.
We've got a whole bunch of sources, Wikipedia, quotes, even a YouTube analysis
Oh, wow.
to really get a grasp on this, this complex
Yeah,
and often contradictory philosopher.
he really keeps you on your toes, doesn't he? Always challenging what you think you know.
Totally. So let's set the stage. Who was Diogenes and, where does he fit in with all the other big thinkers in ancient Greece?
Well, based on what we've got, it seems like this guy was, born to be a rebel, born in Sinope on the Black Sea. But get this, he's either exiled or flees after some kind of currency scandal
Oh, wow.
involving his father, the mint master. Details are a little fuzzy, but
Yeah.
it seems like Diogenes ends up in Athens, a city just buzzing with all these philosophical debates.
Yeah, that's where he runs into Antisthenes, right?
Exactly.
Student of Socrates,
Mhm.
and basically becomes completely absorbed by his teachings. So it's not like Diogenes is just this random eccentric guy. He's directly connected to this whole line of thinkers who, they really push the boundaries of conventional thought.
That's key. Understanding that lineage is crucial to understanding Diogenes' own philosophy, really. Socrates and Antisthenes, they both emphasized virtue, living simply, questioning norms, right?
Yeah.
These themes that become central to Diogenes' whole way of life. But oh man, it's got these crazy twists and turns.
What do you mean?
Well, he's captured by pirates.
Pirates.
Yeah, and then sold into slavery.
No way. The guy who championed freedom ends up someone's property.
Talk about irony, huh? But here's the thing. Even in that situation, Diogenes finds a way to kind of flip the script. He ends up tutoring the children of this wealthy Corinthian owner.
Oh.
The guy who rejected material wealth and status ends up, right in the thick of it, shaping young minds. Makes you wonder, how did that experience, I don't know, maybe solidify his beliefs even more?
Totally. And speaking of beliefs, I think it's time we unpack the philosophy that Diogenes is most famous for, cynicism.
Named, of course, after the Greek word for dog. A comparison Diogenes himself, really embraced. He saw something in dogs, like this natural authenticity,
Right.
free from all the complications and hypocrisies of human society. He admired their simple way of life, living in the present. It's no coincidence that he famously chose to live in a pythos.
A pithos.
Yeah, like a big ceramic jar, almost like a dog in its den.
Oh, right. And there's that classic story, right?
Yeah.
Diogenes sees this boy drinking water just from his cupped hands
Yeah.
and immediately throws away his own bowl.
Fool that I am, he says, to have been carrying superfluous baggage all this time.
Talk about commitment to simplifying.
Right. Like, he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. His whole life was a testament to his belief that happiness wasn't about what you owned, but, freedom from all that stuff.
And it wasn't just possessions, was it?
No, not at all. It feels like he questioned the value of, I don't know, all these social constructs and conventions.
Yeah.
Eating in the marketplace, sleeping wherever, and of course, who could forget, wandering around Athens with a lamp in broad daylight. Looking for an honest man, he'd say.
Okay, but was he really looking for some perfectly moral person? Or, was there something more going on there?
Well, some scholars think it wasn't about finding a literal honest man, but more about exposing the hypocrisy he saw all around him by setting this, I don't know, this impossible standard.
Yeah.
He might have been highlighting how far people had strayed from, living up to their true nature.
So less about one person and more about a statement about humanity in general.
Exactly. There's that quote, remember? Humans have complicated every simple gift of the gods. Diogenes, I think he just saw so much unnecessary complexity in how people lived, way too much focus on superficial things, and he challenged it, constantly.
And that's where those witty, almost theatrical stunts come in, right?
Oh, absolutely.
When he challenged Plato's definition of a human. Yeah.
Featherless biped, Plato said.
And Diogenes, what does he do? Plucks a chicken. Behold, Plato's man.
Sharp satirical mind at work there, right. But he wasn't just trying to be shocking. These weren't just pranks. They were meant to expose the, I don't know, the fakeness of the labels and definitions we put on things.
He had a knack for cutting through the BS.
Right.
and forcing us to question our own assumptions about what really matters.
That questioning, that was central to his whole philosophy. It wasn't enough to just accept the way things were. He challenged convention, not just to, shock people, but because he really believed in the power of reason to lead us to a better way of being.
It's weird, right?
It is.
Like, Diogenes, he's got this reputation for being so anti-establishment.
Yeah.
But he was actually really concerned with virtue. It wasn't just about tearing everything down,
Right.
but like clearing a path to something, I don't know, more simple, more genuine.
And that leads us to one of his most powerful statements. It is the privilege of the gods to want nothing, and of godlike men to want little. That's not just about, material stuff. It's about this deeper detachment, of freedom from all that wanting and striving.
That idea of needing less to be truly free, that still resonates with people today, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. In our world, with all this consumerism and endless choices, Diogenes' philosophy almost feels radical, like a counterculture.
Yeah. Like he's offering this, I don't know, this alternative to everything we're told we should want.
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking about freedom.
The different way of thinking about, well, everything, really. It's kind of wild how, Diogenes' ideas almost, predict Stoicism, which came later in ancient Greece. Both are all about virtue and self-control, about finding freedom from outside circumstances.
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? How much his thinking, even though it wasn't a formal system like the Stoics, still influenced them. It shows how powerful his ideas really were.
So even though people often see Diogenes as this super cynical dude, almost like a misanthrope.
Right.
There's a lot more to him. He really did want humans to, I don't know, reach their full potential.
Absolutely. His cynicism, it wasn't about hating people. It was more like a challenge. He was trying to provoke them to be better, to live more virtuously. I think he saw everyone focused on external stuff, status, possessions. He had to show how empty all that was.
And he did it in such a in-your-face way. His whole life was performance art almost, rejecting success, comfort, even housing. But was that all for philosophical reasons, or was there maybe a practical side to it too?
What do you mean?
Well, by needing so little, he was also kind of, free from being dependent on anyone.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's hard to say for sure, but I bet it was both. He definitely believed in the philosophy of simplicity, but it also gave him this, practical freedom. He didn't owe anyone anything, no possessions tying him down, no need to keep up appearances.
Which brings us to, the legendary meeting with Alexander the Great. I mean, come on, the most powerful guy in the world seeking out this philosopher who lives in a jar. It's such a great image.
It really is, isn't it? A story for the ages. Alexander, at the peak of his power, asks Diogenes if there's anything he needs. And Diogenes just says, yeah, stand out of my sunlight. So simple, but so deep.
And Alexander, what does he say? If I were not Alexander, then I should wish to be Diogenes. What do you think? Was he really impressed by Diogenes' lifestyle? Or was it just a PR stunt?
It's tough to know for sure, but I feel like there's genuine admiration there. Alexander sees this freedom in Diogenes that he, with all his power and wealth, just doesn't have. It kind of reinforces the idea that true freedom comes from within, not from external stuff.
They keep coming up with Diogenes, right?
Yeah.
Needing less, mastering yourself instead of trying to control the world. But is that even realistic in today's world? We're bombarded with messages about getting more, achieving more, wanting more all the time.
It's definitely a challenge, but Diogenes might argue that his message is even more important now than it was back then. Think about it. Haven't we made life even more complicated? Technology, consumerism, everyone chasing status and validation. It's a lot.
So Diogenes, even though he's from ancient Greece, his ideas feel really current, almost like he predicted all this.
Totally. He was criticizing excess and superficiality centuries ago, and it's even more relevant now.
He also seems to have hinted at the idea of cosmopolitanism. He's the first one to use that term to describe himself, right?
Right.
I am a citizen of the world, he said.
Pretty radical for someone living in ancient Greece, where your city-state was everything.
So what do you think he meant? Was he rejecting all ties to society? Or was there something more to it?
I think it shows this belief in a shared humanity that goes beyond borders and cultures. He felt like he belonged to something bigger than any one place or group, and that idea really resonates today with the world becoming so interconnected.
So it wasn't just about rejecting norms, but about seeing this deeper connection that unites us all.
Yeah.
And maybe that connection comes from our ability to reason, which Diogenes seemed to think was the most important thing.
Exactly. He believed that reason, if we develop it and follow it, could lead us to a better, more genuine way of life.
But what about that whole looking for an honest man thing?
Yeah.
Sounds like he didn't trust people very much. Was he really a cynic, like we use the word today? Or did that word have a different meaning back then?
That's the million-dollar question, and I think it gets to the core of who Diogenes was. When he was searching for an honest man, it wasn't necessarily about finding one perfect person. It was more about showing the difference between how good we could be and how we actually are.
So not about an actual person, but about making us think about our own lives. Like, are we living up to our own ideals?
Exactly. By setting up this, impossible search, he makes us confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Our flaws, our hypocrisies.
That's like holding up a mirror to society.
Yeah, daring us to really look and ask, are we living authentically? Are we being virtuous?
But what does that even mean in real life? Could we actually live like Diogenes today? Give up all our stuff, live in a jar, walk around challenging everyone? It seems a little extreme, even for someone who, admires his philosophy.
I don't think it's about copying him exactly. It's more about taking the principles of his philosophy and figuring out how to apply them to our own lives in a way that makes sense for us.
So, what would a modern-day Diogenes look like? What parts of his philosophy could we actually adopt? Yeah, it's not about, becoming Diogenes exactly, but more about, taking the core of his philosophy and seeing how it fits into our lives. Where do you think we should even start?
Maybe with that whole simplifying thing, not just material stuff, although decluttering your space, that can be a good first step. But what about decluttering your mind too?
Oh, yeah.
Figuring out what thoughts and worries and desires, what's really weighing you down.
So, identifying the things that aren't helping us,
Yeah.
that are actually keeping us from being free,
Yep.
letting go of not just stuff, but also mental and emotional baggage.
Exactly. And it might also mean not being so attached to what other people think. Diogenes, he didn't care what anyone thought of him. He just lived by his own rules. Maybe there's a lesson there,
Yeah.
Not being so influenced by other people's opinions, all that pressure to fit in.
There's something really freeing about that, right?
Right.
Not having to please everyone, not constantly looking for approval. It's about defining success for yourself based on your own values.
Yeah, it's about finding that sense of control from within, that feeling of agency that lets you move through the world in a more authentic way.
Right.
And that connects to Diogenes' focus on virtue, right?
Right.
Remember, for him, virtue wasn't about following rules or, social norms. It was about living according to reason, to your best self.
So it's about making sure your actions match your values, living in a way that feels, true to who you really are. But how do we even figure out what those values are?
Yeah.
So especially in a world that seems to be all about superficial stuff and instant gratification.
That's where the questioning comes in. And maybe this is where Diogenes can teach us the most. He was all about challenging assumptions, finding the flaws in conventional wisdom. He wasn't afraid to, stir things up a bit, use humor and satire to expose hypocrisy and make people think critically.
So not just simplifying our lives, but also simplifying how we think.
Yeah. Stripping away all the layers of conditioning and social programming that mess with our judgment.
It's about developing that questioning spirit that Diogenes had, being willing to question everything, even our own beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think this is important, not losing that sense of humor.
Oh, absolutely. That playfulness, I think it was key to his whole philosophy. It helped him stay detached, not get too rigid in his thinking. It's a reminder that even when we're trying to be better, trying to improve ourselves, we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Diogenes, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
Maybe it's this. Even though we can't live exactly like Diogenes did, we can all benefit from embracing a little bit of his spirit, simplifying, questioning, and most importantly, living authentically true to your own values.
And maybe, just maybe, by cultivating a little bit of that Diogenes spirit in ourselves, we can get a little closer to finding that honest man he was always looking for.
Or, maybe even more important, we might discover that honest person within ourselves.
Well said. And on that note, big thanks to all of you out there for joining us on this wild ride. We hope it's given you some new things to think about and maybe inspired you to see the world and even yourself a little differently. Until next time, keep on philosophizing.